Today is the premiere of All Stars 7, and with all the hype surrounding it, it's got me thinking about Drag Race as a whole. I think when a TV show makes it to an All Stars format, it's already relatively successful, but now with an all-winners All Stars, a new point of the success of the show has been reached. Drag Race as a concept has always stuck out to me because it's so insanely unique to the rest of the TV industry. At first, I thought I was being biased because obviously it's my favorite TV show and I'm a creator in the space, but the more and more I thought about it, I was like, no, yeah, this show is monumental. I've tried for a long time to break down what makes the show so unique and entertaining, but it's always been really hard. Every time I watch an episode, I know it's special, but when I sit down to write a script, the words just don't come out. But today, I finally feel like I was able to make it happen. Today, I want to dissect all the positives of the show and make you realize what makes RuPaul's Drag Race one of a kind. What I think people who have been with the show for a long time tend to forget is that this show is so unique to someone who's on the outside. The concepts aren't as easy to pick up as a show in the same realm, and I think that's a really good place to start. And along the way, some faces may pop up just to give their 2 cents about the topic. Mais d'abord un mot de notre pèlerinage. I tried. Today's video is sponsored by Babbel. Babbel is an award-winning language learning app that is extremely interactive and engaging for the user. With Drag Race France on the way, it kind of got me thinking back to high school and how I took French in high school, and I kind of want to brush up on it before I watch the show. It's always been a dream of mine to understand a language, especially if I'm watching like a TV show or something, and Babbel's gonna help me get there. The app really aims to teach you real-world, natural-sounding conversations. It's perfect for travel, business, and of course watching a foreign TV show. And what's great is the app feels so natural because it's designed by actual teachers. Sometimes on these apps you get the feeling that bots are behind it and there's no actual thought behind each of the lessons, but that's not true for Babbel at all. My favorite part though is the speech recognition software. It can accurately recognize your words to help you with your accent and pronunciation. This app is so fun and I would highly recommend it. And of course, I gotta hook you up with a deal. Start speaking a language in just 3 weeks with Babbel. You can get up to 65% off using my link in the description. And what's awesome is they have a 20-day money-back guarantee. So if you're interested, link in the description, go check it out. Now let's get back to the video. The Drag Race format is the first thing that jumps out to me for being super unique. Sure, there are a lot of elements that are similar to other TV shows. I mean, it started out as an America's Next Top Model parody, but the spin that is put onto each of these elements gives Drag Race its own identity. The show covers so much more than other competition shows in the same amount of time. It helps that the show is filmed practically a year in advance, so there's time to cut it down into a very concise and well thought out package. But to make that package feel coherent regardless of when it was filmed is a tough thing to do, but Drag Race does it so well. In a single episode of Drag Race, there could be a recap of the previous week's episodes, a start to the conflict of this episode, a mini challenge, a heartfelt workroom talk, the maxi challenge, a runway, and then a lip sync. To a regular viewer of the show, that is the literal format of the show, but to an outsider's perspective, that may seem crazy. The show is constantly doing a new thing to keep the episodes interesting, and it's done in a way that's still very accessible to anyone watching it.
As a concept, I think especially for like when it first came out, it was just so different. Like it was both like taking in aspects of other shows like America's Next Top Model, obviously, but it was doing it in like such a queer space that like you really didn't see in 2009. Looking at the other reality shows at that time, it was like Fear Factor, which was like so hetero it hurt. As we've gone on through time, like the fact that it's taken things from other reality shows but now has become its own like entity, I just think it's like super cool.
There's really no telling what you're gonna get week to week. I was recently rewatching season 5 with a couple friends who didn't know a ton about the show, and when the episode came back from introducing the girls to then them jumping in a giant tank of water, they were hooked from that moment on. Every basis of what a person could want out of reality TV can be covered in a single episode. People who are looking for some good drama, it's there. People who are looking for some amazing fashion, it's there. People who are looking for some killer performances, they're there. Fuck, I messed up the flow. I think what we take for granted the most is the fact that this show expects these queens to have a sense of fashion, rhythm, comedy, acting, and self-branding all to get them to the crown.
I love Drag Race because it really is like the quintessential reality TV show, and I think that there's something in it for everyone. I personally was drawn to the more like performance comedy aspect of it, but I know people who are really into it for the fashion, the lip syncing, and it's the kind of show show where there really is something for everyone. It's a really difficult show to compete on because you have to be so versatile and like well-rounded in people's skills. And I think we've definitely seen the best of that. I think we've really, you know, the show has been able to showcase a lot of different talent, a lot of diverse talent that you wouldn't always see on TV. And it gets to show a different side of performers. And I think that's really interesting and really cool. From a show level, I think that's the most interesting thing about it to me, is that, you know, it doesn't get boring. Everybody brings something different to the table, and it brings out a lot in contestants that I don't even think that they necessarily, you know, knew that they had inside them. So
shows in the same realm as Drag Race, like America's Next Top Model or Project Runway, have the contestants going in to learn from professionals. There's learning that does go on in Drag Race, but a lot of the contestants and most of the winners go in already knowing a lot of the skill sets that they need. This is a concept that I'll get into in the next part, but what you need to know for now is that the diversity of talents for the show keeps the format so fresh. The shows mentioned previously cover similar things to Drag Race, but a more detailed look at fashion or modeling. You may think that Drag Race also covering these topics along with so many others would water down the product of each, but that's not even entirely true. If anything, the show pushes further with expectations of the queens to be at the level of fashion designers in one week and then perform comedy for professional comedians in the next. And what's crazy is a lot of these queens have been able to meet expectations and push the boundaries of fashion and comedy in a very drag way. There's a reason why designers like Bob Mackie or Marc Jacobs have appeared on the show. They respect the art form and love what the queens do. Having this high of expectations for so many different fields will always keep the show so interesting. A single season of Drag Race can have the queens write a rap verse for Nicki Minaj, design a look for a fashion ball, memorize lines for an acting challenge, do multiple improv challenges, impersonate celebrities, star in a musical, and the list goes on. Name one show that expects more variety out of their contestants than Drag Race. I really think you can. Not to mention, every week has the contestants in the bottom lip sync in order to stay in the competition. The lip sync for your life is one of the most fun concepts that I've seen in any reality TV show. The fact that your run in a competition can be saved by performing well to a popular song is such a drive for the queens to make amazing performances and amazing TV. Lip syncing is so integral to what drag is, and ending each episode with one drives home the point of how much they matter. Not to mention that each song is different every week, which just adds to the freshness. It's also interesting that these lip syncs can really make or break an episode. Something like season 11 Snatch Game was a very below average episode, but the lip sync completely overshadowed any fault and it became an episode that was worthwhile. In contrast, something like The World's Worst was already really bad off the start, and then the lip sync hurt the episode so bad. The lip syncs are just something that someone can look forward to at the end of every episode, regardless of how the quality of the episode is overall. People can go back and watch these moments and be thoroughly entertained, unlike other reality shows. Like, I don't see people going back to the veto ceremonies of Big Brother season 14 that often and being very entertained, you know what I mean?
What I love about Drag Race, or at least used to love about it, is that it started out as a parody or a satire of reality shows, putting the emphasis on the competition between the queens. You can watch the show and see as many of styles as possible, or at least as many of styles as the production deems friendly for the mainstream audiences, and thus you can learn more and see more if you're not able to, see that in your real life, or if you simply do not have the time to look up every single possible drag queen or a drag style. Basically, it's a nice gateway into drag if that's something that interests you, and it doesn't even have to be just a gateway into drag, but into different comedians, into different musicians, into different makeup artists, designers, and such.
Drag Race is constantly moving through an episode, juggling multiple storylines for both the current moment and the season overall. Like I said, having the show filmed so far in advance, plus the normal tools of reality TV like confessionals, allows for the drive of narrative where shows like Big Brother have to hope that they capture the full story. At its best, the edit can show a fully justified winner because we got to fall in love with their character on the screen. They've been able to take a real life person and performance over the course of a filming period and craft it into a winner's storyline. It's true that all reality competition shows drop subtle hints throughout the episode to justify a winner in the end, but the way Drag Race drops these hints brings me to my next point. Reality competition shows that test the strengths of people aspiring to go into a field are always really interesting to me. Project Runway, America's Next Top Model, MasterChef, so many other shows are all the shows that are a way to weed out the contestants until there's one left to get the opportunity to work in the industry. Drag Race is similar, but the way they enter a field is almost in reverse. People who go onto these other shows a lot of the time don't have a lot of weight in the fields they're trying to enter. They may have some sort of model training or have gone to fashion school, which are both very valid skill sets to have, but that doesn't really equate to weight. RuPaul's Drag Race is much less about breaking into the field of drag, instead it's about proving why you should be there. Queens go on the show to maximize their reach to an audience and enter a new stage of their career, but without drag, it would still be a profession to a lot of these queens.
What I really like about this show is that you're seeing these people who are like pretty much already great at what they do, and it's really just giving them a spotlight to show what they're good at and give them the resources to make it even better. Because I feel like for so many of these queens, the only difference of them prior to the show and after the show is that they have like more resources. They get more money to like do bigger things, to like make better costumes, like all of that. So I really think it's like a launching pad that isn't like many other shows. I feel like Drag Race makes them like, unlike any other show, personalities. Like the people want to follow on social media, they want to see what they're wearing, they want to see what they're doing. Like I couldn't tell you what the last like 12 winners of American Idol are, and that show gets more viewers, but you never hear about any of the contestants like you will in Drag Race, because they're popping up in iCarly, they're popping up in music videos, they're like here, there, and everywhere. And I think it's because the show shows them in such like a raw light that people get so attached to them and they want to follow their journeys after the show. They want to go see them in concert, and you're not necessarily going to get that on many other shows.
Basically, I like the fact that it's a platform for people to sell themselves. Yeah, it's a great opportunity for artists to show themselves on television.
The show is so closely tied to the careers of the queens and the personalities that come from it, and how you're portrayed on the show can make you a superstar or make you regret that you ever went on. It basically serves as a live resume for the queens, being able to show off their talents to gain opportunities in the future. Unlike something like American Idol, the queens are only hooked into a contract with WoW for a shorter period of time. Is the contract a good one? That's a question for Bussy Queen, not me. But what Drag Race can bring out where other shows that try to serve as a live resume don't is the opportunities not related to Drag Race. American Idol and America's Next Top Model try to make these people stars through the brand of the show, while Ru Girls do have to stay with the brand for a certain amount of time, and it's kind of good to stay with them, but as long as their relationship is good, they can always go back, and yet it's not required for their career to always stay with Drag Race. It gives them opportunities to pave their own path into outlets that they want to do, like makeup, TV, music, theater, so many things. And again, the way the show portrays these queens will change the trajectory of their careers in the space that they already belong to. Briella from Baxter Springs, Kansas, that works in cybersecurity, going on a singing show and lasting to the second round, won't make nearly as many waves as a queen going on Drag Race. Other competition shows aren't designed to give every single contestant a career afterwards, but the boost of Drag Race pushes the queens, regardless of placement, into new lights. Queens like Shangela or Trixie were eliminated relatively early into their seasons, but they took their opportunities that they were given and spun them into gold, and now they're superstars. Strings will always be pulled behind the scenes like with any production company, but we fall in love with the queens for their personalities, something that the show highlights. The best way I could describe it is that the personality is already there for the queens, it just hasn't been broadcast yet. I love going online and seeing old videos of the queens, or just hearing how excited people were to see them finally get on from their hometowns. The queens were already superstars in their own right, Drag Race just pushes it out to a wider audience. I've gone on about Drag Race's hits and misses with representation before, but I've never discussed the overall scope of the show. At its weakest, Drag Race uses contestants as a tool to talk about certain topics for good TV moments rather than allowing them to bring it up naturally. At its best, the representation resonates so deeply with the people that they feel more safe in spaces and within themselves. But what I've come to realize more recently is that regardless of how representation is showcased on screen, it's still representation. Reality TV is not the most subtle realm of storytelling, but what it does do is broadcast the stories to the people who may need to hear them. I wasn't the biggest fan of how they went about showcasing Willow's condition because I felt like a lot of the time it wasn't her decision to talk about it. But seeing people online resonating with Willow so dearly makes up for any implications made by production. When you see yourself in someone, any representation or attention that person gets will be considered a win. Personally, that's how I felt with Priyanka, someone who's gonna get their own video very soon. The show has a leg up on every reality TV show, especially for LGBTQ issues, because there's already an expectation going in that these will be addressed. When I see on Big Brother the random cut to talking about LGBTQ issues, I'm happy for the talk, but I know the issue isn't going to be handled with nearly as much nuance as a show made by queer creators. Even though, again, I criticize Drag Race for the way they handle medical conditions at points, it still leagues better than other shows trying to tackle the same issue. Because again, these conditions resonate with the experiences of those in the LGBTQ community. Medical conditions like HIV were covered by Trinity K. Bonet beautifully. They let her speak from a very raw and educational place because they knew exactly what she was going through. The issues faced with the LGBTQ community will always be handled with more grace because the creators know where they're coming from and know what's up. The creators of the show know how it feels to be misrepresented on TV, so they try to combat this by making a show that gives them the representation that they've been craving.
Obviously we have shows like Pose that show like older queer people like in their 20s and 30s and 40s and like all of their experiences, but I think to have like a reality show where we hear about like the real queer people, not a character in a television show, hearing their experiences, hearing like how they have grown up and like how being just queer or gay or trans or whatever they are has affected them and whether that be positive or negative, I think it's just so like powerful.
And then we get to the ideas of representation through gender identity and of course sexuality. Gender identity on Drag Race is still a relatively novel concept, but again, it is still so far ahead of the curve of other TV shows. Casting as of recent has highlighted trans and non-binary contestants more and more, with queens from the past revealing their identities as well. The way Drag Race depicts all these forms of drag through all these people with unique backgrounds allows for a lot of the nuance of gender identity to be broken down and spread across the season so people can grasp it and love the concept over time. Especially with things like gender identity, we get a good mix of both showing and telling. The contestants often tell us how much they went through, and then we're shown the beautiful person before us.
I can speak as like I'm a bisexual woman. I think it's important to kind of see people, whether it's gay men, like the show originally kind of had that kind of cast, and then like more non-binary performers and trans women. I think it's so important to see that on TV. I think it has led like a lot of rippling effects in the way that other shows and other productions and other production companies approach casting, approach representation.
Of course, the most apparent form of representation to be on the show is that of sexual identity and embracing the art inside of you. Reality shows can often fall victim to using LGBTQ contestants as a typecasted role in order to claim they have representation. While yes, there is technically representation, the show often defaults the entire character of the person to what they're representing for a community. That so-called representation becomes a typecast as production tries to force the person into the role that production has set up in their mind. Drag Race, of course, does a great job breaking down the barriers and normalizing a lot of different sexual identities. Let's start off with more of the outlier examples and then move on to the bigger ones. Victoria Scone was a cisgender lesbian woman who competed on the show. She was shown to be a delight to work with and showed representation for drag beyond what was depicted on the show at that point. They talked about her sexuality like they do with any other person on the show, something that is a part of her, but what matters the most is the drag artistry. It just goes to show that positive depiction of sexuality doesn't stop at just gay men. Maddie Morphosis served as the first cisgender straight male contestant on the show, and Maddie's storyline was cut a little short, but having her on the show allowed for a conversation along with masculinity ideals being turned on their heads. It's really important to have someone like Victoria or Maddie on the show because it shows that drag isn't just a gay thing. And it also shows members of the community the positive and beautiful sides to other sexualities. We then move on to the most commonly represented group, cisgender gay men. Drag Race does what other shows don't, giving us layers to these people. It again comes from the understanding of the quote-unquote source material. Gay men, or for that matter, drag queens, aren't always gonna act the way people expect them to, and the entire team behind the show knows this because a lot of them belong to the community they are portraying on the screen. So we tend to get a lot more variation in the personalities that are shown on the screen because the sexuality and the identity of these people is one of the lesser important parts. The show is able to go beyond the label of a person and give them an actual personality besides just being trans, non-binary, gay, lesbian, straight, and a throuple, the list goes on. The best way to put it is that the show normalizes the issues by allowing for the people to develop characters past what they are representing. It would be exhausting to rehash the same points over and over again with every queen, so the show often brings it up early on, calls back to it maybe once or twice, and from there the queen can bring it up at their own discretion. Representation on the show isn't always always perfect, but the people behind Drag Race knows it matters, and having a team on board that is only growing in how they want to represent various groups is comforting and promising for the future. Before Drag Race, LGBTQ representation in reality media was mainly seen on Queer Eye or Project Runway. There were also one-off appearances in a lot of other shows, but these were the main two that really focused on a lot of gay culture. They are both amazing shows in their own right, but what Drag Race was allowed to do is talk about the LGBTQ experiences people go through on a regular basis. While these shows do a great job at depicting LGBTQ people on screen, Drag Race goes in with the intention to show the real experiences of the people. The family and mutual understanding of the queens allows for the topics to be so raw and resonate with so many people.
It's a great opportunity for artists to show themselves on television, where previously without a show they most probably wouldn't have been able to do, and they would have just been relegated to jokey, funny, comedic roles that actually make fun of them and not, you know, whatever else.
I was fortunate to come out into a family that accepted me with open arms, but before I came out and even after, I struggled a lot with the way I acted. I came out pretty early on into my life, right before 8th grade, and of course middle schoolers in a decently conservative area would be absolutely ruthless with the things that they said. People would just straight up walk to me and ask, "Are you gay?" and not really knowing how to answer, I would just lie. The lies grew into internalized homophobia because of the way I acted. Seeing how people reacted to guys being more femme, I would push that shit down until it became something I disliked too. That was until I started watching RuPaul's Drag Race. I saw these people being so open with how they acted and being praised for it, and it became my ultimate obsession. I felt so seen on the screen, and it served as a jumping off point for me to come out to my parents. I would bring up, "Hey, I started watching RuPaul's Drag Race," and then they would be like, "Okay, interesting," and then, you know, take a little mental note. I came out and then got them to watch the show, and they were able to fall in love with queer culture because it was so normalized on the screen. I was lucky enough to have a good experience coming out, and my hope is that regardless of what happens when someone does come out, seeing Drag Race will give them the same feeling of being seen that I got back in 8th grade.
I know my parents they were fine with gay people, but it wasn't like super accepted. And really all it took was for my mom to watch Drag Race during the pandemic, and now she's like, literally like, "Oh my gosh, Derek, did you see that picture Shea Coulee posted?" If you normalize them, if you humanize them, if they're not just like this thing in the media that they're saying, "Gay people are taking over, your sons are gonna be gay if they watch Drag Race." Like if you actually like watch these people, you see them in a different light. And I think that Drag Race is one of the biggest shows that have done that. And definitely one of the first shows to really like do that.
Especially when Drag Race first came on, right? There was nothing like that on TV before. A real, testament to the fact that like obviously Drag Race is such a staple for everyone now, but back then like it was, the place that you could go to see queer art represented on TV, which is amazing. I think at the core of it, it really is about community, and it gives people something to talk about, something to bond over. And I think that's what it has meant to me. It has given me a whole, set of friends and community to discuss about it and, find similar interests. And I think it represents that for a lot of people.
There's always more that Drag Race can do to make people feel seen, but where we're at right now can't go understated. I appreciate the show for the commotion it has caused, and hopefully in the future the waves just continue to ripple and become even bigger. Drag Race is monumental, but I know it could be even historic. So I went to DragCon last week, and All Stars 7 is premiering today, like I said. I've been riding this Drag Race high for a while now, and I expected to be burnt out at this point. Being a creator that makes content about their favorite show is weird because you never want to get into a routine where you stop enjoying it and it becomes something that you watch out of obligation. With college and lack of motivation, I felt like I was heading towards that point of burnt out obligation because that's just kind of how my mind works. But working on this video, talking to other creators, meeting queens at DragCon, seeing all the hype for All Stars 7, I feel more reinvigorated now than ever to make content and push out some amazing videos. RuPaul's Drag Race is my favorite show, and it's always been hard to put into exact words why, but I hope I accomplished that today. Any criticism that comes from me or other creators stems from a place of love for the show. We know the moment that the show is, and giving it criticism can make it even better overall. But it's also good to stop and think about all the things the show has done, and it's done some pretty amazing things. A huge thanks to Drag Detective, Yuki, and Kayla for all being in this video. It was so fun to work with them, and I'm so excited to do more things in the future with the people in the community. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. All-Star 7 is finally here. It is crazy, but I am so excited for it. Once again, I want to say thank you to Babbel for sponsoring this video. Please go check them out. They are a wonderful service. And now I'm gonna go lie in bed, learning a new language, waiting for the season to premiere. I'll see you guys soon with another video.